We're going to talk about what has happened in Ukraine on this day of the Russian invasion. We'll examine the actions and the strategies, both military and political. Now, if this is your first time watching, my name is Darren Gertis. I'm a professor who has built multiple leadership programs at Charleston Southern University. So we'll also view these events through the lens of leadership. And I also wrote a book about Zelensky called I Need Ammunition, Not a Ride, and you can find it on Amazon. Okay, so it's day 95. Russians have shelled towns in Mykolaiv and Sumy and Kramatorsk and Bakhmut districts. I mean, it's really, I mean, they're shelling all over the place. Now they're running out of really smart shells. I don't know if that's the right term, like where they can really focus, and they're using what's called dumb artillery, which is just fire it and destroy something. Now the Russians don't mind destroying stuff, so that's not necessarily a bad thing, but they are using shells that have less accuracy at this point. The main effort, of course, is Severodonetsk, and it's going to continue to be the main effort probably for a while. Severodonetsk is starting to look like Mariupol. I mean, if you remember what happened in Mariupol, where they just squeezed all the way down until there was almost nothing left except for that 4 mile or so block of the industrial factory. That's kind of what it's starting to look like. Severodonetsk, by the way, is only 174 miles northeast of Mariupol, and it's beginning to look like the same verse of the same song. Zelensky talked about the situation in Severodonetsk. He said, I consider it very symbolic that the Russian military began to attempt to capture Severodonetsk by entering a hotel called Mir, or Peace, which is really interesting because that's kind of what they did just by destroying the peace of Ukraine. That's what his conclusion was. And he said, quote, due to the Russian strikes at Severodonetsk, the entire critical infrastructure of the city has already been destroyed. 90% of the houses are damaged. Okay. And that's what I'm saying. It's like Severodonetsk is in Luhansk, which is supposed to be the, pro-Russian side. But, if your house was just destroyed, if your family was just made refugees, or a family member, God forbid, killed, I mean, how much do you appreciate the Russians? So he also visited soldiers on the front line today, which was a really good thing for him to do for morale. He said he visited Kharkiv, both the city itself and the frontline positions of our military in the region. Kharkiv suffered terrible blows from the occupiers, black, burnt out, half-ruined apartment buildings, and he goes on. He concluded his address by urging everyone to do their part. He said that, now this was really interesting because, and I talk about his inaugural speech in my book, because he said something about that. And I'm going to read here. He said, quote, in my inaugural speech 3 years ago, I said that each of us is a president. Now, the background to that was his son asked, wait, you're going to be the president. So can I be the president? He said, and he told his son, yeah, each of us should be the president. And what he meant by that was each of us has to be responsible for the country. Okay. So I said, each of us is a president. And right now it's felt the most because our future depends not only on my actions in this office, the office of the president of Ukraine, or on what is being done in other offices in Kiev, but also on what's being done in, and he lists Kharkiv, Sumy, Odessa, Lviv, and he lists a number of other cities. And the point of that was we all have to take responsibility for that. So in the leadership literature, what that looks like is it's empowerment. Right. So he's trying to tie, like, hey, look, it's not just about what I do. It's not just about even what the military does. We all have to play a part in the success of the country. Okay, so that was a really great thing for him to be doing. I mean, as far as a stance of proactively leading, that was phenomenal. Okay, today Putin spoke with French President Macron, German Chancellor Scholz, and Putin said that he's willing to allow Ukrainians to ship grain, but only on the condition that the West lifted sanctions, which is really, it's telling because sanctions are starting to have some kind of effect if he's telling them, well, look, lift the sanctions. So he's using the food, he's weaponizing that in order to get his sanctions lifted, it's a non-starter. According to the Moscow Times, Putin, quote, also told Macron and Scholz that continuing arms supplies were dangerous, warning of the risk of further destabilization of the situation and aggravation of the humanitarian crisis. So if you oppose Putin, you prolong this as opposed to actually stop the war, because from his perception, you're just, just keeping him from his ultimate success. So that's kind of an odd take on this. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov wrote that the quote liberation of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, recognized by the Russian Federation as independent states, is an unconditional priority. So whether they're independent states that are aligned with Russia or they get absorbed into Russia, it doesn't really matter. It's still part of Russia's sphere. And he concluded, but the operation is taking, now this was rich. He said the operation is taking so much time, primarily because Russian soldiers are taking part under strict orders categorically to avoid attacks and strikes on civilian infrastructure. Now, I think that Ukrainians would beg to differ because their homes have been destroyed. I mean, 90% of the infrastructure of a city being, we just talked about, no, they're not taking pains to do this. Now, that might play well on the Russian news, which can't get access to Western media to actually see what's going on, but the rest of the world knows. Okay, so last thing, and this is really, really interesting. So in Europe, they're trying to stop the flow of oil. So remember, Russia is a gas station, as John McCain famously said, mimicking or pretending to be a country. Fully a third of the Russian federal budget comes from the sale of oil and gas. Okay, so if you can choke that out, you can actually really do some damage. So the Europeans are trying to provide sanctions on oil so that they can't sell the oil. And so, okay, at any rate, Serbian president, he's not really for the sanctions. He's trying to make a good deal for himself. Serbian President Vucic, I don't know, Vucic with some squiggly things above the name. Vucic announced that he had secured an quote extremely favorable 3-year deal for Russian natural gas. Well, great. So he doesn't mind doing that at Ukrainian expense, apparently, but he's secured a 3-year deal. Now, at the same time, I thought this was a very interesting contrast. The Kalush Orchestra. Kalush Orchestra won the European American Idol kind of thing. I can't remember the name of it. It's a European song contest, and with their song Stefiana. And by the way, if you haven't seen Stefania, so if you haven't seen Stefania, watch the video of it, like the music video of it. It has a female soldier walking through the streets, like carrying children to safety and whatever. It's just it's heartrending. At any rate, so they won the Eurovision contest with that song. And Reuters was reporting today that Ukraine's Kalush Orchestra, which won the song, raised $900,000 for the country's military by selling their trophy. How awesome is that? So while the president of Serbia is trying to get a better deal for himself, they're doing that. And that was just, wow, what a contrast. All right. So at any rate, that's all that I have for today. Stay tuned and come back on to find out what happened on day 96. Hey, if this video was helpful, hit like to help others find it in YouTube's algorithm. Subscribe so that you can stay informed. And one more thing, if you are moved to contribute to the humanitarian aid for Ukraine, I have a link below for Samaritan's Purse. If you want to give, be sure to give only to reputable organizations. There's a lot of scammers out there. Thanks for your time.